God damn it.
Our live broadcast of the Padre Home Companion. Second half of our show is brought to you by Eccentric Cruises. Yes, Eccentric Cruises, the ideal way to get your weird on. Last week, my son informed me that I was getting old. Despite in no way requiring a reminder of that fact, I actually thought it was a very kind thing to say. To say I'm getting old implies I haven't quite gotten there yet. It subtly hints that there is still time left to do all the things I enjoyed as a younger man, and that the qualities we associate with old are still some years in the future. We have semantic ways of staving off being old. We say we're mature. We're active. We're pretty good for a person our age. We'll even go so far as to say we're so many years young. But as we all know, old is inevitable. And despite my son's reassurances, I am not just getting old, I'm officially there. The realization I was old came subtly. It was almost like a second puberty. My body was going through awkward, uncomfortable changes. I was more moody and emotionally charged. Hair stopped growing in some of the usual places and started growing with a vengeance in others. And I found myself comparing how I looked to other people my age. Looking back on it, the turning point that signaled that I was getting old was when I got a recliner. What a miracle product. You can lie back, put your feet up, and all the aches of the day just melt away. I'm relatively sure that there were times when, if the house had caught fire, I would have waited to see if the flames were actually going to reach me before I even tried to get up. But if I had to pick the thing that clinched the notion that I was getting old, it was when everyone else around me, even those I dearly loved, conspired to have a little fun at my expense by speaking in a near whisper to each other and to me, to the point where I had to strain to hear them. For example, if we were having a family movie night, they would insist on watching with the volume as low as humanly possible. I was pretty convinced that they had all learned to read lips and just weren't telling me. And since there was no way they could possibly hear TV that low, I went on. There were also times when my wife would accuse me of not listening to her. I'm not saying she was wrong every time, but for the most part it was a surprise to find myself halfway through a conversation with her before I realized it. And of course, there were those times when I would discover some factoid only to have her inform me, "I told you that 2 days ago." Finally, my family let it be known in no uncertain terms that it wasn't them, but rather me. They staged a kind of auditory intervention. My hearing was going. Again, not gone, just going. And it was time for me to look into getting hearing aids. I scoffed at the suggestion. My hearing was fine. Maybe I just preferred the television at a more exciting volume. And perhaps I got lost in thought a few times when someone was talking to me, but that's all. I was still keenly aware of everything around me. I was not getting old. But despite my insistence, my wife persuaded me, in the strongest possible terms, to get my hearing checked. I briefly contemplated getting an old-fashioned ear trumpet, but I had a good idea where she'd tell me to put it. So, out of love and respect for the wishes of my well-meaning family, I deigned to go and get my hearing tested. You know, just to prove I was okay. It was a turning point. Not only did I come home with a new set of hearing aids, but with ones my audiologist assured me were the latest in hearing aid technology. Only the really cool getting old guys wore these. It was like I had been reborn. Birds that I had assumed had flown south for the winter and decided to stay permanently were suddenly chirping with an intensity I hadn't heard in years. Cars rushing by, the sound of my footsteps, even the clinking of ice cubes in the ice maker tray all seemed new, exciting, and alive. Anyway, I recalled the old proverb, you never realize what you have until you lose it. When I sat down to dinner with my family that first night wearing my new hearing aids, I told them of my renewed excitement about the world around me. They smiled as I described my rediscovery of the ordinary sounds of life, and they nodded sympathetically as I lamented all the little joys I'd missed out on over the years that my hearing had been going. I was grateful that finally I'd done something about it, rather than let the situation drag on any further. When I'd gotten to the end of my list of wonders, a thought occurred to me. By the way, how long has the top step of the stairs been squeaking? As if they'd been waiting for this question and rehearsed their response in advance, my family calmly responded in unison, 14 years. As I said, I am no longer just getting old, I'm there.